Welcome everybody to Classically Challenged. I'm Ryan, I'm here with Carson, and our lovely guest today is Viviana Cumplido-Wilson, our illustrious flute player, and also a flute player in the Phoenix Symphony during the year. And today, what you might not have known is Vivi, as we call her, is an avid distance athlete. Marathons, triathlons, the dreaded Ironman, and I'm curious to know a little bit more about it. So without further ado, welcome, Vivi.
Oh my God, thank you so much for having me. This is delightful. And yeah, so I was a non-sporty kid. So all of this started happening when I was an adult, like in my mid-20s was when I started running.
So your whole childhood was just flute and school and...
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there was nothing sporty. I mean, it was like not especially encouraged. My family, like, we're not sporty people, and my mom was like not about to like go to games. Like, that's just not what we did. So yeah, I didn't grow up with any of that. So I kind of have made up for it in adulthood. But
was there a specific moment that kind of flipped that switch for you?
Well, I mean, I always enjoyed like working out. You know, I would do gym things. And it was when I moved to Phoenix, actually, that I found myself getting bored of gym things and decided, well, what if I try running? And I can remember seeing a commercial for the half marathon that happens here in January. And I just thought, like, could I run a half marathon? I'd never run more than like maybe 3 miles on a treadmill. And I was just kind of like, maybe. And then sure enough, like as soon as I started work, because this was right when I moved to Phoenix, I joined the orchestra or had my first rehearsal, met some people, and it turned out that there were all these runners in the orchestra. And so they just all kind of like took me under their wing and were like, oh, this is what we do. And all of a sudden I was like signed up for a 5K, a 10K, the half marathon, like all of these things. And by January, I had like, you know, reached my first goal. And so I think the community aspect of it was a big deal, because then all of a sudden it was like, oh, it wasn't just me trying to do this thing on my own, which was a little daunting and scary and not a culture like, you know, that I'd been a part of. No, I had like all these buddies who were also musicians doing it alongside me. So yeah, they really like showed me the ropes and got me going.
So the fact that it was a community of lunatics kind of helped you to
for
be
sure.
less daunted.
I mean,
by what is essentially an insane
company. You should know this.
Right, yes, of course, I know. And
right.
Just so that everyone else knows, a half marathon is how many miles?
13.1.
And then of course the double is 26.2 miles of running. And do you recall what your first time for that was? Or you finished, I imagine, right?
Yes, for the half or for the full marathon?
Let's start with the half. Let's, only go half.
My first half marathon, I think I finished in a little over, maybe it was like 2 hours and 10 minutes or something like that. And then my very first marathon, I finished in, I want to say about 4.5 hours.
Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah, so you finished your first marathon, and the time, I mean, can barely drive it that far in 4.5 hours around here. That's amazing. And then, of course, you didn't stop there, correct? I mean, how many marathons have you done total?
Total, I think I've done 7 or 8 marathons. And so, yeah, and I will say I'm especially proud of the most recent one, because that was my best time by like a lot. So I was really proud of that. Like,
what was this time?
3 hours, 47 minutes, and 49 seconds.
Not that you're keeping track.
Right.
I mean,
or thereabouts.
It did just
roughly
in February, so it's fresh in my mind. But
And have all of the marathons you've run been in Phoenix?
No, I did. My first couple were in Phoenix, and then I did a couple out in Southern California. I did one in Orange County. I did the LA Marathon, which I love the LA Marathon. That to me, like because since I did my master's at USC, like LA kind of feels like a second home, or I'm very nostalgic about it. But I wasn't a runner when I was in school then, so doing this sort of running tour of my old town was really fun. And then I did a couple more in Phoenix, and then this most recent one was in New Orleans, which is real fun.
Great. Well, I mean, at what point does a marathon become not enough punishment and on to...
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like with triathlon, because you are switching gears, the mental component of that in a lot of ways is easier than doing like just a long distance run, you know, because you know at some point like you will get out of the water and move differently, which feels like a relief, at least at first. And then by the time you finish that, you know you're gonna then get off the bike and move differently, which again will feel sort of refreshing for a minute and then move on. But yeah, I think it's funny. This good friend of mine who she used to be the principal oboist in Tucson, in the Tucson Symphony, and I played there for a couple of years. And I remember she said to me, we watched like, you know, like the Ironman like championships in Kona, and they like usually do like a big like highlight thing on, you know, NBC or something. And I remember then she was like, Miss Vivi, I could see you doing that someday. I'd never run. And I was just like, that's crazy. And so yeah, fast forward a good number of years, but yeah, there's a little bit of like, I think the fact that it's sort of like, you know, I mean, as musicians, we're fairly goal-oriented people. Like, you know, we spend a lot of time practicing and perfecting, trying to perfect our craft. And, you know, we work up these recitals and performances. And so it's like, we understand training, like that part of it makes sense. So then like the physical part of it kind of makes it objective as opposed to what we do, which is very subjective. You know, you can sort of feel like you did everything right and it might not go over as well as you thought it would, or, you know, whatever, you won't win whatever.
Every audition.
The struggle is real.
You know, and so there's something really just satisfying about knowing that like I can follow this training plan and, you know, unless I get hurt or sick, like I will actually finish this. Like I will achieve this goal, and getting to do that, I think, you know, gives me a little bit of like balance. It's very cathartic to know that like I can actually like, you know, follow the plan and get there. So yeah, I think that's what sort of spoke to me after a bit.
So speaking of this crossover into music, how do you know, as a fellow air user, as you know, using lots of air in our instrument, with all this running, how has that affected your playing?
I mean, there's no question that like being in good cardiovascular health is going to positively influence, you know, affect your playing as a wind player. I mean, it's just, you have, I mean, in terms of stamina, and also, you know, your heart rate, controlling your heart rate and feeling like, you know, when you're in really good shape physically, you know, you can get your heart rate up high and it'll come back down pretty fast. Like you won't spend like an hour feeling like winded if you're in really good shape. So then you like pack, you know, sort of tie that into what we do. It's like, well, sometimes we're under a little bit of stress when we play, but if you're in good cardio health, you can sort of like bring yourself down, ground yourself a little bit better, I think, in terms of controlling your heart rate and nerves to just sort of be able to, you know, feel like calm and collected and in control. And then as far as like just air control and capacity, like again, I love when I do like a really long run, I'll be physically tired, yes, by the end, but my breathing feels really open, like really, really, really open. Like everything just feels like unobstructed. And so when I go to perform, because lots of times, you know, I might do a training run in the morning and have a concert later that afternoon or in the evening. And it's just like, well, I might be a little tired, but my breathing feels really good when I'm about to play, and that, you know, sort of balances out.
Do you think the same applies with competitive ice cream eating?
I mean, definitely, because, you know, you got to move fast.
Okay, good. I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And what are your future plans? I mean, it seems like this has become more of like a lifelong dedicated activity rather than just kind of a side hobby. I mean, and you said you've run one triathlon so far?
I've done, well, I mean, I've only ever done one full Ironman triathlon. I've done several shorter distances. Like there's, you know, the half Ironman, there's what they call an Olympic distance, the sprint distance. So, you know, there's, you build your way up to that, like just like anything else. Start small.
What are the distances for the full Ironman?
That would be a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, and a full marathon at the end.
Right, just, you know,
right.
Tack on a little marathon.
Just because.
There. Yes. So yeah, and I will say, like, I had such a great experience doing Ironman. I really like my training went really well, and I had a lot of great support between Peter, my husband, and like my friends who were in the, you know, distance community helping me along. But I have to admit, like, after I did Ironman, I wasn't like, sign me up for another one. I was like, that's like practically a full-time job training for that, you know? And so I kind of was like, you know, maybe I'll just stick to like smaller distances for that. Just, you know, unless like, I don't know, if I ever felt like if there was had a friend who wanted to train together and do it, like that could potentially like motivate me. But it's a lot of training. It's so much time. I mean, thankfully Peter is a cyclist and likes to swim and, you know, could join me for some of it. Otherwise I probably wouldn't have seen him at all for like 6 months. Wow. Between like work and training, you know? So yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it is a lifestyle, and people who do end up becoming really like serial Ironman triathletes, like it's a lifestyle, like that's like their whole world. And for me, I was just like, you know, I loved it. It was awesome. I had a great experience. I didn't feel like I needed a redo or anything like that. I was just like, all right, we're good. I'm just gonna keep it a little bit more reasonable in terms of, you know, lifestyle.
Right. Well, wow.
It's amazing. Congratulations.
Absolutely.
I actually came up with a little list here of some questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Hold on one second. Yeah. Have you ever wondered what it'd be like to be a crocodile?
I wonder sometimes if I am part crocodile, because I have very dry skin and I am from Florida. So.
Okay. All right. Well, that was all on that was everything on my list.
That's the only one? Okay.
Yep. That was it.
Well, I mean, for our patrons, time you come and see us and you hear the beautiful flute melodies cascading from on stage into the audience, please know that our guest today, Viviana Cumplido-Wilson, can probably travel further on her own power than most of you can drive in your F-150. Facts is facts, people. So thank you so much for joining us and being our very first guest.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's fantastic.